Hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Refugees in Crisis, Where is the Church? A production brought to you by Adventist Peace Fellowship and ADRA. Adventist Peace Fellowship is devoted to inspiring and educating people to bring justice and peace to their communities. ADRA is the global humanitarian arm of the Seventh-day Adventist World Church. Our organizations came together to provide this resource along with other resources in preparation for World Refugee Sabbath, which has been designated for Saturday, June 18. We will get those links to you before our time is over today. My name is Daniel Shisto. I pastor at the Tacoma Park Seventh-day Adventist Church in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I also serve as part of the executive committee of Adventist Peace Fellowship. Working with ADRA, we titled this virtual town hall, Refugees in Crisis, Where is the Church? Because we are in the midst of an unprecedented number of displaced people, and we want to know what the church is doing about it. How is the global church responding to this crisis? How is the local church serving these, our most vulnerable brothers and sisters? And how are you moving to action in this ever-growing emergency? Do we, as followers of Jesus, the one who said, when we welcome the stranger, it is as if we are welcoming him, do we have a personal duty in this matter? Or do we have blanket immunity because of our thoughts and prayers? Because this matter is political and we shouldn't go into that. Part of our goal today is addressing these questions and inspiring us to do more, to have more compassion, to be more like Jesus. Teresa of Avila is attributed for having said, "Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good deeds. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world." May we walk into this calling this day. Here is a quick run-through of our brief time together today. Just after my remarks, we are blessed to have with us Maya Ahatz, Head of Advocacy at ADRA Europe. She will frame this issue of refugees and give us a bit of context for what this issue entails. After Ms. Ahatz, we will play a short video of the impact among refugees that one local church is having in their community. Finally, we will jump into the panel discussion. We're going to be monitoring the chat and taking questions, so please add your comments, and we would love to include you in this program as well. Thank you once again for taking the time to learn with us today, and now I'd bring on Ms. Ahatz from ADRA Europe. The time is yours.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be with you. I'm joining you directly from the heart of Europe, from Brussels, where ADRA Europe is centered. I would like to start with maybe one thought. The Ukrainian crisis is not the first, we call it refugee crisis, but maybe we should be fair enough and say that we should call it a solidarity crisis, because we had a crisis with refugees in 2015 and 16, and the response was completely different. So maybe we learned something from that crisis in 2015, and when Ukraine war came, we jumped really immediately. Our first priority was the safety of our staff, but immediately, really between in the matter of hours, our churches, our teams, our other teams started to respond. So we responded in Ukraine, and we also responded in the neighboring countries and also in the host communities, and also we immediately started fundraising because money was really important so that we can respond and serve people in need. So in Ukraine, so far, we supported over 1 million people directly. Those who still stayed in Ukraine. We created, for example, hotspots in the conflict areas where we respond to immediate needs like transport, food. We also have hubs in the host communities because many people inside Ukraine are displaced. They moved to the west side. We also work in the liberated areas, and also we have a call center because many people need psychosocial support or any other needs, and we need to address them. Just to illustrate, only in Ukraine, we distributed so far over 1 million loaves of bread, 150,000 metric tons of food, and also we distributed 16,000 cash vouchers for the people, because we put emphasis on the cash for the people so that they can buy what they need. But many times the stores are closed, so we need to provide material aid to the people in need. Also, we did not respond only to the inside the Ukraine, but immediately we also jumped to the borders with Ukraine. I don't know if you remember, but within those first days, there were many images of ADRA logo. Many volunteers were on the borders within the countries preparing transportation. It was less than in 3 days, the first transport entered Ukraine, and we were able to deliver the aid to the people who were affected by this crazy war. And also, what also happened in the countries was that many churches became transit centers. And we host, for example, in Romania, we have 58 churches who served as refugee centers. In Poland, 46 churches who host refugees. But we are not only hosting inside the bordering countries, but also we have a lot of response across the Europe. All our European offices, our church, they are fundraising money. They are having support to the inside the host communities. We are really supporting everywhere and across the Europe. We also partner a lot with the church, and the church is partnering with us. So we have media centers who are creating videos. We are having different departments who are supporting volunteers. We share information. We really work closely with each other. There are also some challenges that we are facing. One of them is something that I mentioned at the beginning, is that this crisis currently is not the only refugee crisis. We also have Venezuela. We have forgotten war in Yemen, Syria, ongoing conflicts in many parts of the world. And because of this war in Ukraine, and Russia, they create what we are facing now is a food shortage. Because most of the aid in grains came from these two countries, and those who are suffering the most are, for example, people in Yemen. It's also, we expect that this crisis will take a long time, and even if the war stops now, we will have a lot of problems later on to recover the countries. There are also potential conflicts because of the food shortage, and there are many things that we need to address. So this is very briefly what is going on in Europe right now.
San Diego is a beautiful city on the Pacific Ocean at the southern tip of California. It is also home to a growing population of refugee families that have fled from religious or political persecution, seeking a safe haven and a new start at life. When they arrive in the United States from countries like Burma, Laos, Iraq, Sudan, and Rwanda, most do not speak English and have very little but the clothes on their back. The Paradise Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church in San Diego County recognized the great need in their community and began an immigrant and refugee ministry.
It's the refugee capital of America right now. There are 90,000 refugees here in San Diego, and they are lonely. They need someone to love them. They've left their family behind. They don't know anybody here, and they respond to love.
The church distributes over 7,000 pounds of food each week to nearly 500 families. They also have developed a community garden to provide fresh produce for the refugee families and to help them cope with the depression they may struggle with from missing home or devastating news of loved ones. Paradise Valley recognized that two of the greatest needs in the immigrant and refugee community are English as a second language classes and work training experience. To respond to these needs, they lead individualized ESL classes supplemented with computers and software-based learning programs. They are working with young people and adults to teach them English and help them develop the skills to thrive independently. The aim of Paradise Valley's immigrant and refugee ministry is to care for others and reflect the love of God within their community. This demonstrated compassion has resulted in a vibrant, growing church with more than 100 people over the last 2 years giving their lives to God.
Every church needs to have a ministry that is relevant not only to the members but to the community in which they live in. We're here to impact our community and to make a difference for eternity.
Touching one heart, one family, one community, we can transform the world. You can make a difference today.
Thank you, Paradise Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church and the North American Division for contributing that video to show us an example of how local churches can be involved. It's good to see so many of you joining us for this conversation today. I see so many of you in the chat room. You know, your viewing of this virtual town hall from around the world and across the United States really demonstrates the widespread interest in the faith community for responding and helping refugees. You know, each year, ADRA leads the global church in recognition of refugees on World Refugee Sabbath, which this year is June 18th. In addition to the activities in your local church, we seek this year at ADRA to have a global conversation on the refugee crisis and all its impact on our lives, and to figure out how, as a global church family, we can all work together to address the emerging crisis, in addition to food and shelter, in addition to kind thoughts and wishes. As Maya from Europe explained, there are some emerging needs that calls for advocacy. The refugee crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine continues to unfold with extraordinary speed and scale. At the same time, as Maya explained, globally, tens of millions of other refugees and internally displaced children and families struggle for aid and safe harbor. As a matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, the United Nations Refugee Agency put out a report that said the number of refugees and displaced people worldwide topped 100 million for the first time. A surge certainly propelled by the war in Ukraine, which displaced, by the way, about 8 million people in just 3 months. But we're also seeing new waves in Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Myanmar, Nigeria, Afghanistan, Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Syria, Venezuela, and Haiti. Now, we know that many in the faith community and the Seventh-day Adventist denomination have been and are working to help refugees. But we also recognize that there are some who are still struggling with how much to help, whether they should help the stranger within thy gates. And so we hope that this panel discussion that we are about to get into will provide some answers for you today and challenge you as we move forward as a church family to assist refugees. We are the church, individuals who make up the body. So joining me today for this discussion, I have with me some illustrious and experts, great experts on this topic. I'd like to first introduce to you Isabella Cunha. She is with UNICEF. She is the Civic Society Advocacy Specialist, and she is key, I would say, key to the United Nations Children's Fund, which is an agency of the United Nations responsible for providing humanitarian and developmental aid to children worldwide. She's on our panel to represent us, the UN's work in that area. Next, joining me is Attorney Jennifer Graywood. She is the Associate Director for the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Department at the General Conference SDA World Headquarters, and she is representing for us today the legal perspective and the public affairs perspective from the GC. We also have Gabriela Phillips from the North American Division Multilingual Ministries. She's the coordinator for Adventist Muslim Relations, and she's representing on our panel the work of the division with Muslims. Then we have Pastor Doug Hart from Markham Woods, SDA, Florida, my home state. And he's also the Ukrainian Relief Coordinator. He may not like that title, but he certainly is doing a fantastic job. And he's representing on the panel the innovative work of local churches. We also have with us Pastor Mo Stiles. She's also a chaplain, and she's doing her master's in human rights and refugees. And she's joining us all the way from Australia. Thank you so much. But she certainly will be on our panel today representing the progressive work to help. Thank you all for joining us today in this conversation. I want to start our conversation, however, by framing our discussion as to why are we even facing this crisis? What is causing the present exodus? Why are so many people seeking refuge? Isabella, I'm going to start with you first because you are a part of the United Nations, and that's the main principal intergovernmental organization that's charged with maintaining international peace and security. So can you tell us why the numbers are mushrooming?
Okay, so I can kind of hear myself a little bit, but let me go for it. Hello, Dr. Percy. Thank you so much. Just want to start very quickly by thanking you and thanking the Adventist Peace Fellowship and ADRA for this invitation. This question is really important, and I just want to start by reaffirming what you just said because it bears repeating. 2 weeks ago, we reached the really terrible record of, since it's been started being counted, of number of displaced people, of 100 million people who have been forced to leave their homes. If it had been a country, refugees and displaced people would be the 14th largest population in the world. And this is a number that we cannot forget. In the case of children, which is my area of work, boys and girls, we have about 35 million children who are displaced nowadays. This number has doubled in the past 10 years. So I just wanted to say before going to the answer, our best assessment of the gravity of the situation. So unfortunately, the causes of it are well known. They have been around for a long time. They are conflict. So it's a mix of protracted conflict. What is protracted conflict? It's conflict that never got resolved, plus so people that have been displaced and not been able to come back, plus other conflicts that have been put on top of it. So for example, by the beginning of this year, we had 90 million refugees, and since then, just in the last 6 months, due to the war in Ukraine, we tipped all the way to 100 million. On top of it, what we have as as a trend is climate change and weather related events. So let's say cyclones, floods, droughts that cause upheaval in the lives of people and force them to flee. And for example, just as of last year, 24 million people were displaced due to weather related events. So it's really not an insignificant number. And unfortunately, the trend in this sense, it's only to become worse given the situation that we see right now with climate change and the lack of mitigation measures. It's just to frame. It's not. I don't have any good answers. I don't have anything too nice to say about it. Just want to once again say that no one wants to leave their homes. No one wants to be in this situation. And this, it's so great to see the church coming together to reflect on this situation and come to solutions together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabella. And I think, in that assessment that you gave us, if you really take a look at those numbers and really drill down deep, you see that most of those people who are refugees are children. I saw a report that said that of the millions who fled Ukraine, roughly 9 out of 10 are women and children. And when you actually take a look at the regions around the world where we are seeing a large amount of refugees and displaced people, so if you take a look at it regionally, so anywhere from Ukraine and Afghanistan, Syria and Venezuela, Myanmar and Somalia, Iraq, South Sudan, Guatemala, Ethiopia, Chad, Haiti, just to name a few, about half are children under 18. Isabella, I know you work with the faith community, you work with Christians, you work with people of different religious faiths. I want you to tell us, how does UNICEF work with the faith community to protect the most vulnerable, to support and to protect refugee children?
Thank you, Dr. Percy. This is again an excellent question. And UNICEF is very proud of our track record working with faith organizations and faith communities, because it's a given. We can't get to communities and we can't get to the children without our faith partners. They are there before we arrive. They're always there. Once we leave, they are still there. So I just want to leave this word of recognition for the amazing and very crucial work that the faith community does. So we've been working with, including ADRA, for decades, and it's very multi-pronged. So one way in which we work with the faith community to protect children, it's really as implementing programs together. So, for example, ADRA is the relief arm of the Adventist Church, and together with ADRA, we implement programs, let's say, on education and on protection and on health for children in Venezuela, in Syria, you name it, in a lot of countries, to promote their well-being. Second is that UNICEF works in advocacy, going back to what Maya was saying, advocacy in specific issues that are targeted in regions or in countries where the church or different denominations, not only the Adventist Church or the Christian Church, as you said, different faiths are well placed to bring about change. So, for example, in the case of Europe, we've hosted conferences and plans of action together to to tackle xenophobia and discrimination against children on the move in the region. And we share data, we inform each other, and we coordinate on the best way to go about our advocacy actions. And thirdly is at the community level, really. We have this flagship initiative called Faith and Positive Change for Children, where we work closely with faith leaders at the local level, including refugee camps, including in internal displaced, in places where internally displaced children live, to tackle social norms that may be harmful to children, but also to promote social norms that will help with their education, their health, vaccination, so on and so forth. In the case of COVID, for example, we worked with imams in Cox's Bazar in Myanmar to promote hand washing initiatives and vaccination afterwards, which all of that, as we know, has also an impact on the lives of children. That's what we've been telling with UNICEF and COVID.
Isabella,
please help me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to get back to you because those are some very, very good programs that you're highlighting for us, and I want to get more details about that, and perhaps we'll get back to that discussion. But I want to bring in one of our pastors right now because I really want to assess, is this what you're explaining to us, Isabella, the need? Is this a government problem? Is this a government responsibility, or is it a church responsibility? Pastor Doug Hart, I want to bring you into this because from what Isabella just shared with us, I want us to assess the responsibility of the church in this crisis, as she explained. Now, your church certainly has gotten involved in a tremendous way in helping refugees. And somehow, as a church family, you must have considered whether or not churches should be involved. Is this political, Pastor Hart? Should churches be involved in this?
Well, the fact that I'm on this panel, I would have to say no, and I'm sure everybody knows that I'm convicted on that. I do think, in my experience, it is a minority of Adventists that do criticize this as political. I think the bigger problem is probably just apathy and just trusting ADRA to do everything, and we just give a little bit of offering every now and then to ADRA, and we've kind of taken care of it. But no, I mean, I think Daniel just posted on the chat section, pure and undefiled religion is to look after widows and orphans. And if you look in the Old Testament, there were three classes of people, actually. And some translations call it the alien, as well as widows and orphans were the classes of people that God judged the Israelites on how they treated them. So no, I mean, to say that this is political, unfortunately, these are refugees in many cases due to political reasons. I just recently got accused of choosing the wrong side in the Ukrainian conflict, which was a bit ironic since my wife is Russian. My mother-in-law still lives in Russia, along with brother-in-law and my nephews. So, I had to remind him that this is not a political issue. If it were, I would have chosen the other side. This is a Christian issue, a moral issue of doing the right thing. And if you look in the Old Testament, I think God made it pretty clear for those who wanted to have a broad scope of what a believer in the one God is supposed to do. And that's to take care of those who are fleeing. I mean, if you look in the Old Testament, God always had the Israelites or the patriarchs on the move, moving from country to country. And I think it's so that he told the Israelites, it's so you will remember that you were once like this as well, which probably explains why I have more of a passion for it. I lived for 8 years overseas serving as a missionary. So I know somewhat what it's like. I haven't had to go through what many of the refugees go through, but at least I've had to leave my country, learn another language. It's very difficult. And, dealing with homesickness and, so no, I don't think anybody can get away with saying that the church should not be involved in refugee ministries.
Pastor Hart, I appreciate you sharing how personal this is to you, because sometimes we need to put a face on the people that we are helping, or the face of people who are affected by this. But let's continue along this theological line in our analysis on Christian responsibility. I want to bring in Pastor Mo Styles on this, because I really want us to dig even deeper on this. Pastor Styles, as a people of faith, what is our hermeneutics on loving the stranger at our gate? And is this impacting the way we participate and respond?
Thank you, Dr. Percy. What a great question. I think just in response to Pastor Hart's comment regarding the political accusation, I think any time that we are engaged in justice work and responding to the injustices of the world, we are engaged in political conversation. And the fact that we are people of faith means that we are in this kind of resistance as well. And so we cannot avoid the engagement, but also the response to political impacts on refugees. And so it is unfortunate that we kind of have those accusations, but the reality is we're in it. So as far as the question is concerned, I think that is something that we need to probably dig into a bit more, because the way we respond and the way that we engage in issues of justice is a reflection of our understanding of Scripture. And so therefore, if we kind of have a tainted view of the human and the image of God, means that we respond to issues and justice issues from that perspective, and from that hermeneutics, and from that understanding of theology and the Bible as well. And so I think as far as the church is concerned, our conversations that we're engaged in needs to, there's a saying that often we use. It says our faith ought to reflect our political views and whatnot. That can go either way, and I say that I mean that by saying that if we have a certain view of who refugees are, and we use the Bible to kind of prove or affirm that view, that can be either dehumanizing, or it can press us into our engagement with refugees and also the injustices of the world. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers it briefly, but yeah.
You did. Thank you so much, because both you and Pastor Hart really shared with us some biblical principles, and I love the way you even pointed us into where to find in Scripture more on our command as Christians, as followers of Christ, to care for the least of these. When I think of refugees, sometimes I say we are called to take care of the lost, the lonely, and the least of these, because oftentimes you do find that these people are in vulnerable positions, which is where I'm going to bring in Attorney Woods on this, because we often forget about the vulnerabilities of refugees. So in other words, what I'm saying here is that our refugees, they do need food and shelter, but there are more things going on here, right? Because Attorney Woods, I know with you being at the General Conference, you have that worldview of what's going on with Christian refugees, and in particular, Adventist refugees. I want for you to share with us some of the vulnerabilities of Christian refugees on the move. Can you share with us any examples of how the World Church, the General Conference, has supported refugees?
Sure. So to talk about how the World Church has supported refugees, I really think about it in three main ways. First, I want to talk about the importance of the fact that we, since 2016, have recognized World Refugee Sabbath. This is a big deal because it brings awareness to members about ways they can help this vulnerable population. And this has been set as the Sabbath preceding World Refugee Day, which takes place on June 20th. So that's why this year it's taking place for churches across the North American division, I think, and across the world on June the 18th this year. There are also a number of statements that our church has made that provide support for the marginalized as part of our global mission. So I'm just going to read some snippets of a few of those.
Okay.
So from our One Humanity statement, which is one of our most recent church statements that has been an official statement of the church, it said that we will support and nurture those marginalized and mistreated because of their caste, color, tribe, or ethnicity. We also have a statement in our Call for Peace statement that says justice requires non-discrimination, respect for human dignity and equality, and a more equitable distribution of the necessities of life. It says economic and social policies will either produce peace or discontent. And Seventh-day Adventists' concern for social justice is expressed through the support and promotion of religious liberty and through organizations and departments of the church, which work to relieve poverty and conditions of marginalization. And I'll just pause there for a second to reiterate something that Pastor Moa said, and that is that part of our mission really is in promoting social justice. I think sometimes that phrase has been politicized, right? But we are called to promote social justice as Adventists, as Christians. The last statement I'm going to pull from is from our human relations statement, and that says that Seventh-day Adventists deplore and seek to combat all forms of discrimination based on race, tribe, nationality, color, or gender. We believe that every person was created in the image of God who made all nations of one blood. But I really want to say the most important way that our church has been involved in supporting refugees is not through our policies, not through our statements, not even through World Refugee Sabbath. It's really through the work that's being done on the ground, through ADRA, through our divisions, through our unions, through our conferences, and through our local churches. That's where the work is really being done, through initiatives that are focused on ministering to the needs of refugees and immigrant populations, by providing shelter and clothing, by collecting donations, by sending money where it's needed, by supporting ADRA. Statements aren't going to solve this problem. It's us as members of the church who are going to help alleviate the suffering of this vulnerable population.
You know, I'm glad you actually quoted from the One Humanity statement. I would encourage folks viewing this live or when you see it in recording to actually go online and read that statement. That statement, I was so proud of our church when I read that statement. Our church acknowledged certain things, even apologized about certain things in that statement. And so thank you, Attorney Woods, for bringing up that statement. Again, powerful statement. But when it comes to Christian refugees that are vulnerable, let me bring in Gabriella Phillips, because Gabriella, it's not just Christians, right, who have fled from areas controlled by extremists. It's not just Christians who are in vulnerable areas, right? We are seeing that there are Muslims on the move, and you have a unique ministry, Gabriella. You work with Afghans, Syrians. Talk to us a little bit about the work you do with Muslims. You know, a lot of people may not realize that the North American Division actually has an office that does that, and you are the coordinator. So talk to us a little bit about how you work with Afghans, how you work with Syrians, and so on.
Thank you so much, first of all, for including me in this important conversation. And yes, I am blessed to be part of a team from the North American Division and work very closely in collaboration with Terry Saley. We do have a ministry dedicated for refugees, and specifically my work is dedicated to engagement with Muslims. So we overlap with Muslim refugees. And for the past few years, one of my core tasks has been help the church to mobilize the church to, first of all, start challenging some of those perceptions when it comes to Muslim refugees. Actually, 2 days ago, I was talking with my colleague, Terry Saley, and she was saying, how interesting, Gabby, I'm getting calls from people saying, can we support and house refugees from Ukrainian, but during the many, many years that we had been working with both Afghan refugees and Syrian refugees, never once anybody called, said, can I open my home for these refugees? So there is an issue of perception that is very critical for me to address and call it for what it is, sinful. I have noted in the story of when Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan, that the man who got hurt, he was naked. And I noted that as a very critical marker of this is what the man who came to help saw, a human being in crisis, in need. He saw his humanity. We carry the breath of God. So quite a bit of my work actually consists of tackling the issues of what are we afraid of one another. Because, by the way, Muslims are also afraid of us, but that will be for another time. And so the issue of perception is a very critical one. Also in my work, I help to mobilize churches to realize how easy actually is to reach out to refugees. Yes, there are big projects that can be done at the local church, but there is that one-to-one way that you can impact your neighbor, simply with a prayer, simply with just acknowledging his presence, with a salam alaikum, with a greeting. And I could talk so many more things, but I will mention this one more. I have noticed how critical the church's role in North America has been when Adventists had become social brokers. What do I mean? Besides giving something to the refugees or reaching to the refugees, when they have actually invited the refugees to come to our churches and said, look, here I know someone who has a building company, maybe he can hire you, especially if there are women who are wearing headscarf. The likes that they will find jobs are very likely to be reduced. And so by having Adventists taking on that role of, I'm going to mediate between my community and this new community, is absolutely been beautiful to see how that has not only impacted the refugees, but also changed the DNA of the churches. Churches that are missional have no time to fight. And here I have a pastor that I hope he can add to that. So I'm going to keep it short here, but
you're raising some very, very critical points, though, about how we as Christians assist those of other faiths. And I really want to get back to that point you were making, because if I'm hearing you clearly, Gabriela, you're saying that as Adventists, we may need to really think about how we're treating Muslim refugees. And to be fair, some of us may not know how.
yeah,
So
right.
let me ask this question of you, because you work closely with Muslim refugees. Is it okay to talk about Jesus with Muslims? Is it appropriate to share the gospel with refugees? Would it be taking advantage or exploiting their vulnerability to share your faith? Those are some of the types of questions that you often hear from Christians. How would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, thank you. I absolutely love that question, because I think that one of the things that is very unique to Muslim refugees is that they come from a worldview where spirituality is so embedded that they will say hello and they will tell you assalamu alaikum, be upon you. You ask them, how are you doing? They will say, alhamdulillah, praise be to God. So the whole idea of being surrounded by God is expected. And when they come to the United States or to many other countries, especially in the Western Hemisphere, where we are only focusing on their material needs, they feel that there is something missing. They want to see that spirituality. They want us to talk about faith. They want us to pray with us. Now, when it comes to Jesus, there is a big barrier there. So my advice always is talk to them about God as much as you want. And as you get to know them and meet their needs, as they tell you that they will welcome you to their life, they love a spiritual conversation. I think that has been one of the strengths of the work we have doing. There's tons of churches doing an amazing job, but we have developed kingdom relationships with the refugees, and they have a spiritual, and they have told us over and over and over, we want this. Because other people give us so much more, materially speaking, but we feel this spiritual connection with you. We pray with the refugees. We enter into their life because we want to be a source of blessing. And I'm telling you, I've been now 25 years working with Muslim refugees and never once been rejected from a home, never once been rejected a prayer, because they love that spirituality that becomes tangible. So I would say there is a huge place for us to actually be spiritual in ways that maybe I can't be with my neighbor, and I need to talk about the weather in a way I don't have to talk with my Muslim neighbor refugee. Now, when it comes to matters of faith, I escape to tap into how we do life. They're going to start asking me questions about my faith. And that's the point where I can bring the fact that what is driving my thinking is that I look at Jesus and he becomes the model that I follow, and how beautiful it is. And then things naturally develop. So I will not start talking about
Yeah.
Jesus, but definitely from day one, I meet a refugee, I pray with them.
All right, Gabriela, I'm going to get back to you later on to talk about some specific things we can do as a church family, specifically to help Muslim refugees. But I'm going to ask Maya a question before we take questions from the chat room. Maya, is Maya still with us? The head of advocacy for ADRA Europe. If she's still with us, I'm trying to create, Maya, the picture of the needs of refugees. And I want for you to share with us a little bit about some of the needs that has nothing to do with food, but it has everything to do with protection. Because we're finding that, for example, on the border, after refugees started to flee Ukraine, that there was an issue there that you brought to my attention. I want you to tell us a little bit about some of the protection issues, because I believe ADRA Europe even put out a statement. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? And you're muted, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, I was muted. Before I say something about protection, can I just continue and just add a little bit
Sure.
From the previous refugee crisis in Europe, and it talks about the connection with the Muslims. I 100% agree with Gabriela from my very practical point of view, because when I was working with refugees in 2015 and 16, I was in Slovenia. We were along the Balkan route, and I can say that the difference between the response at that time and today, when we have Ukrainian refugees, which are Christians and also the skin color is white, is completely different. And also the church response is completely different. I'm not here to judge church members, because there were many who responded, but there was also a little bit of a hate speech. And this is why I would like to point out that when you talk about advocacy and advocating for the refugees, we need to start with ourselves first. And we should not make a difference between any kind of refugees, because no one chose to be a refugee, and Jesus died for them all. We should not make a difference between, if they are Muslims, we will not support them. If they're Christians, we will support them. So I think the first advocacy should take place inside our own church and our own faith community. The second one, you asked about the protection. Immediately when the refugee crisis started, the borders were opened, and there was, we noticed that there was, every time when you have a refugee crisis, there is human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and also labor exploitation of minors. So we need to address these issues, and immediately we started to put in place the protection mechanisms, hotlines in Ukrainian language, protection, especially because this time we had majority of women and children, and it was a horrible, and in every refugee crisis you have the exchange of for example, women are exploited, and they are taken advantage of, and they offer sexual services for the exchange for the food and shelter for the kids. So these are hard questions that we also need to address, and we need to do everything in our power to protect children and women. Another thing that I would also like to bring the attention to, because this crisis also takes money, and governments are cutting the development and humanitarian aid in other countries to support the refugees in Ukraine. So they're taking from the poorest to support the people in need in Europe. And the third thing that I also mentioned before is the food insecurity. This war is bringing a lot of food insecurity again to the poorest of the poor. So we have many these advocacy issues that we need to speak up, to be open and be bold.
Thank you for pointing that out, Maya. There are some advocacy needs. Refugees, they do need someone to speak up for them, right? Because the issues vary and they certainly expand beyond the need for clothes and food. I want to take a couple of questions from the chat room before I go into my second round of questions, because my second round of questions has to do with how-tos. I want us to give our listeners and our viewers some specific ways, some practical takeaways of what they can do to help refugees. But before we do that, Pastor Daniel, are there any questions from those who are joining us online?
Yes, a few questions have come in just on that topic. First question's coming from Kara, watching in Tennessee. She asks, are there statewide resources we can tap into to find out where refugees are being resettled? Or does ADRA have resources to point us to how to help here in the United States? First question. Second question from Bill Wells. Do other divisions, I'm assuming he's talking about divisions of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, do other divisions have leaders in similar positions as that of multilingual ministries and ARIM that guide refugee work?
All right. Gabriella, you want to take that for that last question, because you would know about other divisions having multilingual ministries.
Yeah, well, I was going to take the first one, but it's okay. I feel more at home with the first one, so let me give it a go. Actually, Kara, I'm also in Tennessee, so I would love to meet you. I'm working 8 minutes from Southern University, if that works, if you happen to be in my neighborhood. But the best way to know is just go to Google and put resettlement office near me. And then you are going to have your particular resettlement office, and just go and they will tell you what are their needs. And yes, there are resources from the side of the North American Division, ARIM, that is the one that Bill Wells is asking. It stands from Adventist Refugee Immigrant Ministries. They do have a website. Terry Sally is here, so she can put something on the chat and about resources that they have specifically developed for refugees in general. Now, Bill Wells, yes, other divisions do have Adventist Muslim Relations coordinators, but I would say probably ADRA has been the one that worldwide has mostly focused on refugee. It's a little bit different in the rest of the world than here in the United States. That's kind of my take.
Yes, and I would invite all our viewers to go to the ADRA.org website. World Refugee Sabbath, for example, has plenty of resources. And Maya, I'm sure you have some information as well for those who are watching in Europe to get more information on guides for refugee work.
Yes, we work with refugees on the division and also on the country levels. But of course, most of the work is done inside the countries. And most of the work is coordinated through the ADRA local offices. But local offices are always working together with the church. So it's always cooperation.
All right. Okay. Before we run out of time, let me just jump right into it with the how-to questions. Pastor Mostiles, can you talk to us a little bit about how can churches engage in meaningful and informed conversations regarding refugees that are seeking asylum?
Yeah, thank you. I think that for starters, this is one of the platforms that you have created is a good start. There are plenty of resources out there that have that's also been mentioned here. I think just asking questions and get conversations going is is from a position of curiosity. I was just thinking about Gabriella's comments about Muslim engagement, and also the way that we talk about, Jesus. I think the fact that we actually act on justice work is talking about Jesus in action, because I think often we kind of come with an agenda of trying to convert people when already these people are traumatized, and to try and then impose anything else probably isn't as helpful. So just starting conversations within your local church, asking questions about the issues that are faced by refugees, and responding to, and not being tone deaf to the issues and that is impacting our world. That is a start. There are a plethora of information out there that we can tap into and be informed by. And I think you engaging in this conversation and watching in is a good start as well.
Thank you so much. Just listening to you, Pastor Stiles, I realize that this is a recurring theme in a lot of the responses, and that is about prioritizing the help for refugees. Attorney Woods, what about this? What about prioritizing helping Christian refugees? Is that legal?
No, under the UN definition of refugee, and let me pull this up, because I'm not sure if we ever talked about this, and I want to make sure I stated. Just give me one.
Sure.
Moment. The United Nations, it defines a refugee as someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. And they have to have a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And most likely they cannot return home or are afraid to do so. Nowhere there does it say to prioritize Christians or one religious faith over another. It says anyone who is being persecuted for a certain set of reasons is considered a refugee. And I believe in our ministry, we should treat all people as worthy of our help and our assistance, regardless of their faith or their belief or their lack of any faith or belief whatsoever, right? We're called to love, and it's nowhere even in the Bible is a qualified love only fellow Christians. It's love your neighbor. Your neighbor is anyone who's in need.
Right. So the help is supposed to be based on vulnerability and need, and to do otherwise certainly would violate international refugee humanitarian laws, especially if you're an organization, and not to mention biblical principles of the Good Samaritan, right? Exactly. So thank you for that, Attorney Woods. I want to go back to Gabriella. I want for you to tell us what are some specific ways that as Adventists we can work with Muslim refugees.
Well, I'm excited that there will be a Sabbath, refugee Sabbath. So I would say that's it. That's your launching point. Don't wait. The opportunity is right before you. So after that Sabbath is a time to call your church to specifically pray. You can put in the bulletin, interested in supporting refugees, contact me. And you put your name there. And if you're wondering, okay, so what happens next? Just go to your Sabbath school class and say, should we be supporting at least one local refugee family here? And if there is an interest, you can just Google local resettlement office near me and go and say, here we are a team of Seventh-day Adventists and would like to volunteer. What are the things that we can do? They will tell you. Don't be scared. The biggest gift you can give to the refugees, your presence. Even if you don't do much, just go in there and say, here, we are your neighbor. I would want to know, how are you doing? How can we help you? They will tell you. But as a first step, I would say that just take the plunge. June 17, it's your day, your starting point. And we are looking forward to hear about tons of churches after June 17 saying, yes, count me in. It could be very simple. And by the way, do never, ever think that it's about doing a lot of things. Often the biggest gift we give to the refugee community is praying for them and praying with them.
All
So
right.
here are some very simple steps.
Thank you. I've got maybe 5 more minutes, and I want to get to Isabella and then Pastor Hart. Isabella, are there some specific ways that the faith community can work with UNICEF? You know, what if a local church wants to work with? I have you answer that question. How can the faith community work with UNICEF to help children on the move?
Well, the faith community already works with UNICEF in many ways to help children on the move. I think from the global place where I sit, what I wanted to leave as a message is for the fellowship of the church to be champions of refugees. And I could tell you a few things that we call on government, and the more these kinds of asks are normalized and championed by people like the Adventist Church, I think we can change the conversation about refugees in a positive way. So I just wanted to say a few of them. So one is to know that every refugee child, for example, is a child and they deserve protection no matter where they are and no matter where they're from. So UNICEF calls on all governments to ensure that asylum-seeking refugee and migrant children are integrated into national child protection systems as soon as possible. So for example, this is something that every single person who's part of the church, if they can, once they hear about something, a conversation like that, they can be part of that conversation in a positive way. A second one is to be champions of and any type of detention of children, of champion family reunification. The church has been such, they have been on the forefront. Before we managed to get to the children, the church is already making sure that that children are being sorted out so they can be together with their parents, and really continue to support an organization like ADRA, with whom, for example, UNICEF has such wonderful working relationship in so many countries, really ensuring children's the education, the protection, and the health of children on the move.
Thank you so much, and thank you for reminding folks that their support of ADRA goes a long way.
Very long way.
Yes, indeed. Pastor Hart, I want to spend my last few minutes with you, because you are on this panel because you have done a remarkable job with responding to the Ukrainian crisis all the way from Florida. I want you to tell us a little bit about what you have been doing with helping Ukrainians. We're going to close with a video by you, but the video doesn't really tell us certain things. Can you share with us what you see as the long-term needs for Ukraine and the long-term plan of your church to be involved with helping?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Percy. Last week at this time, I was actually in Ukraine. I went to Chernivtsi, the western part of Ukraine, with a group from our church, another pastor from Nebraska, Mick Henton, and another church member from Maryland. And we just wanted to see what was going on. We ended up, the church in Nebraska, College View, raised $26,000, and we took that money, our church and people in the Orlando community, to raise about another 25. We took that money along with 26 suitcases of medication and supplies for orphans, and we went over there. Now, just to back up a little bit how I got involved in that, because I'm not Ukrainian. My wife is Russian, as I mentioned before, and I have worked with refugees from Iraq when I was living in Lincoln, Nebraska. So this was a new thing, working with Ukrainian refugees, even though I'd served in the former Soviet Union for 7 years as a pastor. So when the war started, right away, I had a desire to help out, because it's a part of the world that is closer to my heart, because I live there, or near to there. And I found out that the division treasurer was visiting his daughter here in Orlando from the Euro-Asian division, which was headquartered in Moscow. And I got in contact with him and just said, what can we do? And he said, listen, we've got money there in the Ukraine right now for other projects, and we can't do those projects right now. If you can raise money at your church on a Sabbath you have your treasurer send me an email on Monday, and we will release that money that same day and I'll be on the ground. And we were doing mainly evacuations of people from the front lines. So they were sending vehicles over to get people out, a very, very dangerous work. And then as the refugees were coming to Western Ukraine, they were feeding them. And when they would go to rescue the people, they would actually bake literally thousands of pounds, thousands of loaves of bread, take them, drop them off along with diesel and gasoline so people get put in their cars and get them out. So within the first few weeks, according to the people we were talking to, our church and the other churches of Florida, because we got the whole Florida conference involved, and so far we've raised about $500,000 for that work.
Wow.
And we were able to get, I don't know, 5,000 to 10,000 people evacuated. And ADRA took over the project of making bread, as far as I understand, right now. And yeah, so we were able to feed tens of thousands of people. And the church in Western Ukraine, maybe this is a fitting way to end, because the title of this this discussion is where is the church in a refugee crisis? I can tell you that you can be very proud of the Ukrainian Seventh-day Adventist Church for how they responded to this crisis. They worked hand in hand with ADRA, but as I said before, a lot of times many of us think, well, even as a pastor, well, we'll let ADRA do their thing. We'll give an offering, but in this crisis, ADRA. And I don't know, Maya can tell us exactly how many employees they have in ADRA, and this is in no way a criticism of ADRA. But ADRA has a limited amount of employees in all these countries. So if you have to rely on just those employees in the system to do something, it'll be slower and not as big. The church in Western Ukraine, they took in, it's over 5,000 people into their churches, into their homes in the first couple of weeks of the war. And they were feeding them, they were clothing them, they were getting mattresses, they were getting bunk beds, they were transporting them. And then that's not even to speak, those are people that were in the churches. They were transporting people to the train station, transporting them to the border, letting them use their phones, calling. They were doing all kinds of things. The pastors there, out of 315 pastors in Ukraine, only 10 of them left the country. All of them stayed at their post, and their union and conference presidents told them, listen, anytime you get a call, it's like you're getting a call from your boss. Do whatever they want. And so our pastors, they told me they were getting 1 to 2 hours of sleep for the first month of the conflict. And they were just doing yeoman's work there. It was really inspiring. And even when we were there last week, it's calmed down a bit. Most of the people that went out of the country, are gone, and now they're left with a few thousand in their churches. But we didn't go to one church where there was one Sabbath school room that was free. People were sleeping in every Sabbath school room. Sometimes there were 100 people in one bathroom. ADRA came in and helped get showers in one place for them, which was great. The church members in Romania, the other countries around there, they started cleaning out their cellars and sending in food, and that's how these churches were feeding all these people. ADRA again, and it was this symbiotic relationship of the church stepped up, ADRA stepped up, and they worked together to make this happen and get all this food across the border. So right now they're looking at long-term, they don't know how long the war is going to go on, as no one knows that. But none of their churches are completely functioning. They have worship services on Sabbath, but they're looking to get longer term housing. We saw some projects that they have. They're still having to feed these people, and I think some of that food from the other countries is starting to dry up. So,
Pastor Hart, I really appreciate you sharing with us the need that continues and the involvement of the pastors and ADRA in this effort. I want to actually show a short video about your church, the work that you're doing, and I'm going to have them play that video. And once that video is over, I have some final thoughts that I'd like to share with you before we wrap up.
So on February 24, I heard about, bombings in Ukraine, but then I got a text message from my cousin who was living right by Kiev. And she just said, Julia, pray for us. We're being bombed. We are in the bomb shelter. I'm terrified. So I knew it was real, and I felt like I was there with her. And then we received messages. We started to message all our family and friends, and many of them heard explosions that night. So it was very scary.
So the trauma that we see, and especially when it comes to kids, children, it's just so significant and so immense. And that's why Julia specifically, she was on fire to do something about it. Not just pray, not just provide emotional support, not just provide spiritual support, but also act and be the feet and hands of Jesus right now.
The pain was so severe inside. I think we're all in agony that we're here in safety, and our family, our friends, and so many people are not. We cannot just sit back and watch. We cannot be silent about this. We have to do something. So we decided to start a fundraiser and help in any way that we can. People are just responding in a way that is so incredible, and we realized that it's not us, it's God, because people reached out who don't even know us. They said, we've heard about this mission, the rescue project that is being done for evacuating people. We want to help. So right now we have so many volunteers that are in Kiev, in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, who are volunteering their time, whatever means they have.
In fact, we actually have a couple of bakeries who bake almost 2,000 loaves of bread. So just 2,000. So they bake that bread, pack it, and transport it to Ukraine. So they give it away, no matter who that person is. Just come and get it. And what is also important, because so we do it through the church. So Church in Ukraine, Adventist Church in Ukraine, they receive these funds and then they distribute them because they see the situation, and they're specifically, so these funds are specifically go to evacuating citizens, church members, and whoever comes there, they're evacuated. They pick up truckloads of food, they load them into their vans, and then transport those into central Ukraine. In fact, just last Thursday, which is, it was day 14 of war, day 13 of war, they purchased a bus. And that bus, the price of that bus was $6,000, by the way. So we contributed into purchase of that bus. And so what they need gas. Gas to actually send that bus to go and pick up people. And that bus, so it was purchased on Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon, it was already on the road. So this is how urgent that situation is. So now it's like a Schindler's List mission. What can we do to save one more person? What can we do to save one more family?
On or about April 13th, Julie and Oleg traveled to Ukraine with medications and aid for the medical clinic and orphans. As they stated, God had blessed their efforts all along the way. Even as their own family suffered loss in Ukraine, their family members continued to volunteer and help others. Julia and Oleg have been instrumental in bringing the medications needed for these mobile clinics. The doctors that are staffing these mobile clinics shared how the medicines will save lives. One doctor in particular was clearly overjoyed at how much it meant to her. This story will continue, as with any war. And we are grateful for our Lord who hears our prayers and supplies our needs.
Pastor Doug Hart, we thank you for what your church is doing, and we thank you so much for being with us. To Isabella, Jennifer, Maya, Gabriella, Pastor Stiles, we thank each of you for your time and for sharing your insights today on this very important issue about refugees and the emerging crisis and the emerging needs that's calling for voices to speak up and to advocate to protect refugees and those who are most vulnerable, regardless of their background. You should note that at ADRA, we deliver relief and development assistance to individuals in more than 118 countries, regardless of their ethnicity, political affiliation, gender, or religious affiliation. And we do so using biblical principles that's reflected in our motto: justice, compassion, love. And so we hope that you will join us this World Refugee Sabbath, June 18th, in your local church with a special prayer for refugees all over the world, as well as activities that are planned by your local church to recognize a refugee on this special day. Special thanks to the Adventist Peace Fellowship for hosting this panel discussion. Your commitment to help refugees is commendable. And you know what? It's been a true delight and pleasure to work with you on this project. Back to you, Pastor Daniel.
Thank you so much, Herma. And wow, thank you, panelists. Absolutely inspiring. I start where I end where I started. Yours are the eyes with which Christ looks compassion to the world. There seems to be absolutely no limit to what the local church can accomplish when we act with compassion toward the communities in which we have been placed. I also want to thank each one of our panelists for inspiring us to do more today. I want to thank the Paradise Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church, the video we saw at the beginning, the Markham Woods Seventh-day Adventist Church, breathtaking work that you're doing, and Washington Spencerville Korean Seventh-day Adventist Church for the powerful work they are doing in and among the refugees. Thank you also, Dr. Herma Percy, who called us at Adventist Peace Fellowship to collaborate on this project. Thank you, Neville Salvador from the Hollywood Seventh-day Adventist Church. Thank you, Chris Blake, pastor of the San Luis Obispo SDA Church, for the countless hours, along with Herma, that you poured into these past few months, working hard to put this program and other resources together to raise awareness on this critical issue. Resources can be found at adventistpeace.org, as well as adra.org/World Refugee Sabbath. We'll leave that slide up for a second so you could write that down. Our time has been well spent. Thank you for joining us. I leave you with the words Jesus shared to encourage his followers in regards to the end of the age. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Amen and amen. Thank you for joining us. God bless you as you seek to serve the community in which God has placed. God bless.